our metropoles, targets our hotels and our financial centers when they have nuclear weapons. And so the worry in the Indian government was that nuclear weapons had emboldened Pakistan to sponsor these groups who were perpetrating more daring and audacious attacks against India. And because Pakistan had nuclear weapons, India didn't have a conventional retaliatory option to punish Pakistan for these attacks. And so the Indian government for a decade has been trying to deal with what they believe is a policy paralysis about dealing with a Pakistan that is more willing to support militant organizations to attack India now that it has nuclear weapons. So brief outline of the talk. I'll talk a little bit about basic deterrence theory, right? Political science and in economics, the core of nuclear strategy, both in the Cold War and now, is deterrence theory. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Hopefully it's not too basic. I don't need to talk about the basics of nuclear weapons to this audience. We'll go through it really briefly. And some of the choices states have to make and how they operationalize their arsenal, which are really important in the India-Pakistan context. We'll talk about the causes of and the process of nuclearization in South Asia, how and why India and Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons. And then I'll close with the consequences and where we are today, focusing mostly on the period since May 1998 is the break point in the India-Pakistan nuclear equation. That's when India, led by the then BJP government, tested nuclear weapons, followed 3 weeks later by the Pakistanis. I'll close with some. So basic deterrence theory, right? So the definition of deterrence, very simple. This is a definition of deterrence. This is all inspired by guys like Tom Schelling, Herman Kahn, Albert Wolff. Anybody familiar with Cold War nuclear strategy, this will be familiar to, right? So basic deterrence theory in any context is trying to preserve the status quo by threatening unacceptable costs to an opponent or an adversary if they do X, right? Some specified action. So if you do X, I will do Y. And the idea is we preserve the status quo, and the idea is that Y, the punishment that you impose on your adversary opponent, should be greater than the benefits of them achieving whatever their objective is, X, such that they are deterred from undertaking the action. Tom Schelling used to love examples with children. So I have an 18-month-old son myself, and he's starting to understand things. And you know, as children get older, right, deterrence by punishment. Example that Tom Schelling used was if your child does, you know, something bad, you punish them by sending them to their room, denying them dinner, timeout, right? So there's some punishment after the fact if they do X. In another example is if you hit me, I will kill your mother, right? So there's a punitive aspect to the deterrence threat, such that the punishment exceeds the benefit of whatever an adversary's objective would be. So in the Cold War, the deterrence by denial threat was counterforce. We were going to disarm and target their own nuclear forces to make it impossible for them to carry out their first strike. So in a case where somebody is attacking me, a deterrence by denial threat would be, instead of killing your mother, I cut your arm off, so you can't attack me. Right? And presumably the cost of cutting your arm off so you cannot achieve your objective in the first place is sufficient to deter you from undertaking it, right? So a good way to think about this deterrence by punishment is we will punish you with such severe costs after you undertake the action, such that you'll have no incentive, rational incentive to do so, versus we will ratchet up the cost while you try to achieve the objective, such that you won't be able to in the first place. So I think it's an important distinction when we think about nuclear strategy. Even in the South Asia case, in the Cold War, the distinction was counterforce versus countervalue, right? So for those familiar with Cold War nuclear strategy, when we threatened to target Soviet cities or their economic or industrial capacities, that was largely a deterrence by punishment strategy. So in the event that they launched a conventional or a first nuclear strike against us, we would retaliate against their cities. The alternative was, and this was a big debate early in the Cold War, in case of a conventional conflict, we would launch nuclear weapons at their nuclear weapons such that they would not have the ability to launch those weapons at the United States or its allies. So the deterrence theory has several basic requirements. Call them the 3 C's, right? So you need to have the capability to pose the threat that you're promising, right? So if you're threatening to destroy an adversary's cities in the event they do something, you need to have the capability to do that, right? So you need some explosive capability, but you also, most importantly in the nuclear sense, you need a delivery capability. You need to be able to hit their cities, right? And it needs to be transparent to the adversary.